How many friends? These matter-of-fact instructions on how to disrelate send a chill down the spine of those raised on the traditional notion that friendships are for the long haul. But before accusing the business world of undue ruthlessness, it is important to recognise that precisely this pattern is employed, often beneath a veil of hypocritical regrets, in other strata of society as well. The professor who is promoted to dean, the military officer, the engineer who becomes a project leader, frequently play the same social game. Moreover, it is predictable that something like this pattern will soon extend far beyond the world of work and formal organisation. For if friendship is based on shared interests or aptitudes, friendship relationships are bound to change when interests change, even when distinctions of social class are not involved. And in a society caught in the throes of the most rapid change in history, it would be astonishing if the interests of individuals did not also change kaleidoscopically. Indeed, much of the social activity of individuals today can be described as search behaviour, a relentless process of social discovery in which one seeks out new friends to replace those who are either no longer present or who no longer share the same interests. This turnover impels people, and especially educated people, towards cities and into temporary employment patterns. For the identification of people who share the same interests and aptitudes on the basis of which friendship may blossom is no simple procedure in a society in which specialisation grows apace. The increase in specialisation is present not merely in professional and work spheres, but even in leisure time pursuits. Seldom has any society offered so wide a range of acceptable and readily available leisure time activities. The greater the diversity available in both work and leisure, the greater the specialisation and the more difficult it is to find just the right friends. Thus, it has been estimated by Professor Sargent Florence in Britain that a minimum population of 1 million is needed to provide a professional worker today with 20 interesting friends. The woman who sought temporary work as a strategy for finding friends was highly intelligent. By increasing the number of different people with whom she was thrown into work contact, she increased the mathematical probability of finding a few who share her interests and aptitudes. We select our friends out of a very large pool of acquaintanceship. A study by Michael Gurevich at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology asked a varied group to keep track of all the different people with whom they came in contact in a 100-day period. On average, each one listed some 500 names. Social psychologist Stanley Milgram, who has conducted a number of fascinating experiments dealing with communication through acquaintanceship networks, speaks of each American having a pool of acquaintanceship ranging from 500 to 2,500 people. Actually, however, most people have far fewer friends than the 20 suggested by Professor Florence, and perhaps his definition was less restrictive than that employed in everyday use. A study of 39 married middle-class couples in Lincoln, Nebraska, asked them to list their friends. The purpose was to determine whether husbands or wives are more influential in selecting friends for the family. The study showed that the average couple listed approximately 7 friendship units, such a unit being either an individual or a married couple. This suggests that the number of individuals listed as friends by the average couple ranged from 7 to 14. Of these, a considerable number were non-local, and the fact that wives seemed to list more non-local friends than their husbands suggests that they are less willing than their husbands to slough off a friendship after a move. Men, in short, seem to be more skilled at breaking off relationships than women. Training children for turnover. Today, however, training for disaffiliation or disrelating begins early. Indeed, this may well represent one of the major differences between the generations, for school children today are exposed to extremely high rates of turnover in their classrooms. According to the Educational Facilities Laboratories Incorporated, an offshoot of the Ford Foundation, it is not unusual for city schools to have a turnover of more than half their student body in one school year. This phenomenal rate cannot but have some effect on the children. William White, in The Organisation Man, pointed out that the impact of such mobility is as severe on the teachers as on the children themselves, for the teachers are thereby robbed of a good bit of the feeling of achievement they get from watching the children develop. Today, however, the problem is compounded by the high rate of turnover among teachers too. This is true not only in the United States but elsewhere as well. Thus, a report on England asserts, today it is not uncommon, even in grammar schools, for a child to be taught one subject by 2 or 3 different teachers in the course of 1 year. With teacher loyalty to the school so low, the loyalty of children cannot be summoned either. If a high proportion of teachers are preparing to move on to a better job, a better district, there will be less care, concern and commitment on their part. We can only speculate about the overall influence of this on the lives of the children. A recent study of high school students by Harry R. Moore of the University of Denver indicated that the test scores of children who had moved across state or county lines from 1 to 10 times were not substantially different from those of children who had not, but there was a definite tendency for the more nomadic children to avoid participation in the voluntary side of school life, clubs, sports, student, government and other extracurricular activities. It is as though they wished, where possible, to avoid new human ties that might only have to be broken again before long, as if they wished, in short, to slow down the flow-through of people in their lives. How fast should children, or adults for that matter, be expected to make and break human relationships? Perhaps there is some optimum rate that we exceed at our peril. Nobody knows. However, if to this picture of declining durations we add the factor of diversity, the recognition that each new human relationship requires a different pattern of behaviour from us, one thing becomes starkly clear. To be able to make these increasingly numerous and rapid on-off clicks in our interpersonal lives, we must be able to operate at a level of adaptability never before asked of human beings. Combine this with the accelerated throughput of places and things as well as people, and we begin to glimpse the complexity of the coping behaviour that we demand of people today. Certainly, the logical end of the direction in which we are now travelling is a society based on a system of temporary encounters and a distinctly new morality founded on the belief so succinctly expressed by the co-ed in Fort Lauderdale that, frankly, you'll never see these people again. It would be absurd to assume that the future holds nothing more than a straight-line projection of present trends, that we must necessarily teach that ultimate degree of transience in human relations. But it is not absurd to recognise the direction in which we are moving. Until now, most of us have operated on the assumption that temporary relationships are superficial relationships, that only long-enduring ties can flower into real interpersonal involvement. Perhaps this assumption is false. Perhaps it is possible for holistic, non-modular relationships to flower rapidly in a high-transient society. It may prove possible to accelerate the formation of relationships and to speed up the process of involvement as well. In the meantime, however, a haunting question remains. Is Fort Lauderdale the future? And just an aside, the Fort Lauderdale reference, if you remember, was from the first section of this chapter 6, when it talked about a large number of students migrating from their colleges to the coast of Fort Lauderdale for a week, for a week of sun and sex before disappearing back to their studies. Back to the text. We have so far seen that with respect to all three of the tangible components of situations, people, places, and things, the rate of turnover is rising. It is time now to look at those intangibles that are equally important in shaping experience, the information we use, and the organisational frameworks within which we live. End of chapter 6.